A warm welcome to our talk on Brick Walls by David Kinghorn. Dave, in 2008, was given a copy of Legacy Family Tree software as a Christmas present. And at the time, he knew a little bit about his mother's parents, but all he knew about his father was that he had an aunt who lived in Edinburgh. Dave didn't make much progress with the free searches offered by Ancestry.com that came with the software installation, and his real discoveries only started after watching Who Do You Think You Are, one of BBC's programs, when the episode dealt with someone with Scottish ancestry who had made use of the website www.scotlandspeople.gov.uk. Through this website, which is the official Scottish repository of births, deaths, and marriages, as well as national census records carried out every 10 years from 1841 to 1901, and joined as he realized he would find fellow researchers from there from whom he could learn a great deal. He became vice chairman in February 2010 and then chairman in 2015. Dave has had great fun visiting Scotland and tracking down some of the places where his ancestors and their relatives lived and worked. As a lover and student of whiskey, one of the trip highlights was to visit a distillery that had been run by a great uncle by marriage. Dave says he hated history at school as a school subject, but doing genealogical research has put a very different perspective on things. He now keeps uncovering new and fascinating facts about how his ancestors fitted into an ever-changing world, and this brings history to life to him. Dave, we so look forward to your talk today. Over to you.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm going to take my cap off, but you'll notice it's a tartan cap, and I'll explain a little bit about it. So there we go. And so the first slide deals with my Scottish pedigree, and more better still, my Scottish heritage. And as you can see, all the people marked in green are Scottish. So the exceptions being my father, who was born in East London, in fact, but of Scottish parents, and me. And there was an odd English lady who came into the picture as well. You'll notice the background to this, by the way, is my maternal grandmother. That's this lady's. This is the Davidson tartan on this side, and the one I was wearing, namely this one, not sure how well the colors show up, on the right is the Mitchell tartan. So fundamentally, my reason for wearing tartans, let's say, is based on a maternal linkage rather than, maternal linkage rather than male linkage. Now, my talk is going to be in three parts. The first part is basic research using Scotland's people. Then I beg forgiveness or indulgence, let's say, people like Doreen and Donald, and whom I didn't expect to see, because I was told that they were going, and I was aware that there are an enormous number of new members. And so I've taken a case study which I presented some years back, and which illustrates a whole series of points, one of which allowed me to extend on this particular John Moody. I think you can see my mouse pointer thing pointing at this character, and purely by chance, or from my perspective anyway, at one of our meetings way back, Rob Bush, who was the vice chairman, said, "Hey, I found your grandfather," that's this guy, John Alexander Moody's, will. And this produced a whole can of worms, which then has made me redraw this particular part of the family tree. Incidentally, I managed to get back to the mid to late 1700s on all four grandparents. So there's quite a lot of Scotland's people's made quite a lot of money out of me, let's say. So, and then the third part, I'm just going to do one or two examples that will log into the live Scotland's people, and we'll look at one or two live examples. Okay, so this is the home of Scotland's people. It's at 2 Princes Street, Edinburgh. It's got all the national records of Scotland, and so it's got the registration of census, births, deaths, and marriages, and all those sort of archives. So that's what Scotland's people looks like. It's got a beautiful, you can just see the top. This is a big domed ceiling where you've got this main central reading room that's very, very beautiful. Right, so this is what shows up when you log in. I've logged in, you can see it's my account, or this is now just a screen print. But the important issues, first of all, it's a pay site. So the charges are 6 credits for looking at any of the registers, in other words, the birth, deaths, and marriage registers. The census also 6, the valuation is 2, and the wills is 10. Now you buy 40 credits for £10, and that is roughly equivalent to, say, yesterday it was 206 Rand, so is what it cost me for 40 credits. So it's relatively expensive because you're looking at just under 7 Rand if you want to look at an exact hit. So that's, oh, and one last thing, you can buy so-called vault copies. So if you're applying for Scottish citizenship or anything like that, you can get authentic copies from this. I'm not sure what it costs. I've never tried, but I'm sure under our charges it'll give that information. So that's a quick overview of the sort of thing, and you can then go in and search the records. Now, the menu structure, if you like, is this is the top layer menu. You've got the statutory registers. From the 1st of January 1855, by law, you had to register births, deaths, and marriages. Prior to 1855, you've got to look at church registers, and those don't necessarily have all the information you want, because you weren't legally obliged to register the birth, the death, or the marriage. Then you've got census returns from 1841 to 1911, Natalie. 1911 is there, and I would imagine that 1921 will be coming fairly soon, because you've got to be, the census records are sort of shown after 100 years. Then you've got valuation rolls, so you can search and look at properties and buildings and occupiers from 1855 onwards. It depends very much what you're looking at. Then you've got legal records, which are things like wills and testaments, coat of arms, soldiers and airmen's wills, and records of military service, appeals and tribunals. I've never looked at poor relief and migration records. It's interesting, and we'll have a couple of examples of poor relief I'll mention later in terms of the Widows and Pensions Fund, but certainly one of my Kinghorn ancestors married an elder of the Kerk who was an what was he, inspector of the poor, I think. So, you know, obviously the church was looking after. Clearly, there was a huge problem about the Highland clearance, where the British landlords kicked most of the crofters and the tenants off the land, and there was a massive migration from Scotland, and you wound up with jobless people and so on. History sort of has a habit of repeating itself, I think. And likewise, I've never been to Kirk sessions because so far in my research, I've not found it necessary. So those are the main menus. Now, here you will see it highlights in blue what you happen to be looking at. And so you've got sub-menus: births, marriages, divorces, deaths, civil partnerships, and dissolutions of marriages. So those are the basic menu structures of the data that's held in these systems. So by way of an example, I'll do my mother's birth. Her maiden surname was Moody Constance. I should have clicked female. I've left it as both. You can put in a year range. She was actually born in 1900. You can look at, go down to sort of county. Very often when you get a huge number of hits on the file, or huge number of things that satisfy the criteria that you put in, this is a way of reducing that. So you can go down to the county or city, and then you can go down into the district or parish underneath that. So you can narrow down the detail from which you need to fish out the data that you actually want. So here, this is the result of my searching for my mother. You'll see that she was born in 1900 in Dumfries, and you can then view the image. I paid for that for 6 minutes. So here you see what you get on the screen. You first of all get her name. I've blown this up. This is the actual detail as shown. Clearly you can, on the real system, as you'll see, you can zoom in and do all sorts of things, save it, print it, and so on. Anyway, here's Constance Moody, born on the 29th of May 1900 at 9:50 p.m. Born in the Bank of Scotland House in Dumfries. And her father was John Alexander Moody, a solicitor and bank agent. And mother was Susan Moody. And then MS stands for maiden surname, and that's Davidson. And they were married in October 1891 in Maxwelltown, which is a town just across the river Nith from Dumfries. Signed by my grandfather, and it was done in Dumfries itself. So that's an example of the sort of detail you get out of the what do you call those things? The whatchamacallit records, the statutory register. Okay, so that's an example there. Looking at the church register example, if we look at, and here you've got the options of looking at Church of Scotland, Old Parish Records, Roman Catholic Church, other churches. You can search on the surname, and you can exact names only, fuzzy matching, wildcards allowed, names that begin with, name variants, and phonetic matching. So you get all those options you can start searching on. You're looking for the forename, which I've left blank deliberately in this case. And I'm looking for any male Moody's born between 1815 and 1820. And the one parent's name, the father's name was John, and the mother's name was Jane Allen. And here we get John Moody with Jane Allen producing yet another John. Now, this is a huge problem in this family. They're all either Johns or Williams. But you can see that they were twins born on the 15th of November, 1818, and born in Abercorn. Now, Abercorn is a small village, I would say, more than a town, quite close to Queensferry, which is where the Forth of Firth road bridge crosses the Forth and goes across into Fife. So that's what the result of that sort of looking at parish registers. Okay. Clearly, the detail is not as much. All it really says is John Moody and Jane Allen produced a son called William or John or whatever it happened to be on such and such a date and such a parish. It doesn't give any further detail as you've got in the statutory records. Okay, then let's look at census, and again we're looking at another John this time, and I'm looking for a male in the age range of 39 to 41, and I'm looking at the whole of Scotland, right? And this is what comes out of it. Very difficult to read, but basically it's saying on 107 Irish Street, you've got John Alexander Moody, Susan Moody, Elsie Jane Scott Moody, and John Greenshields Moody. John Alexander is the head. This is his wife. Elsie Jane Scott, my aunt, is a daughter. And then John Greenshields Moody is a son who's my late uncle. And then Constance Moody, who's about 10 months. So we've got the ages as well. Okay, and then it's showing whether they're married or single. Giving the ages, very difficult to read regular or sometimes. Anyway, the next sort of column is the occupation. So my grandfather, as we already know, was a solicitor and bank agent for the Bank of Scotland. Doesn't mention anything about the wives in those days. And then you've got scholars, and then they've had 2 servants. And this becomes a very useful facility. It tells you where the person was born. So that John Alexander Moody was born in Montrose, which is up on the east coast of Scotland. Susan Moody was born in Kirkkinnow, which is part of Dumfriesshire. And then you've got the rest of them the children were all born in Dumfries. So this is handy when you're trying to tie people together. Okay. Interesting old photograph just thrown in for good measure. This is William, the brother of John Alexander. This is my grandmother, Susan. This is the father, another John who was a sea captain. Here you've got Aunt Elsie and my Uncle Jack. And I figured that I worked out because Sea Captain John Moody's wife wasn't present. She died about 1896. So this picture was obviously taken around about this time, and clearly in I suspect in the garden of the Bank of Scotland house, which is, as I say, on 107 Irish Street. This is another photograph of the children a bit older, where you've got Elsie, Connie, and my Uncle Jack. So that's the sort of example of a census. So apologies now to those who've seen this before, but it's a useful case study, and talking about breaking through brick walls. And the brick wall was really, I could never find the father of John Moody, who was born in 1880, and anything to do with predecessors, any sort of sensible data. And the key clue came from finding the will of my maternal grandfather, John Alexander Moody, which Rob Bush unearthed in a family search thing for me. And here we can see that here's John Alexander Moody, born in 1861 in Montrose. That's definitely him, and he definitely died in 1935. And better still, here was his will. Okay, so now I'm going to run through some of the issues that do my research about. First of all, he talks about the framed portraits of my father and mother. Now, these we know about because my sister-in-law has them, and they're sitting in her retirement village cottage. Then we've got this portrait of the actor Philip John Kemble, and you'll see that the source of this document or this painting was one Robert Williamson, who's proved a thorn in my side because he keeps appearing as either a brother-in-law or an uncle, and he's no blood relation at all, but we'll meet up with him later. The portrait itself is a copy of a picture that's hanging in the National Gallery, and my cousin has it, a copy. Then we come to the Malacca cane with a china top. This belonged to the sister of my great-great-grandfather, so that's a few generations back. Sorry, I'm just finding the place in my notes. Bear with me a moment. Bear with me, sorry. Right, so it's talking about my grandfather's sister and her husband, Captain Lawless. Oh, sorry, no, it's the Malacca cane. Belonged to my great-grandfather, William Moody. So now we at least know what John Moody's father was called, yet another William, whom we didn't know anything about. I remember the china top cane. It was in my grandmother's flat, but nobody in the family knows what happened to it. So I'm afraid that one's a bit of a dead end. Then there's this photograph of an oil painting, which I had assumed was probably this particular John Moody, who was the first of the sea captains, as far as I've been able to establish. Well, it's not, clearly. And so it's now introduced the fact that it's a picture of the sister of this John Moody, and I had no idea there were any sisters. We know he had a twin brother, but no idea of the sisters. So that blew some research apart. We've got the two gold watches, one belonging to uncle, and it says quite clearly in the wheel, my uncle Robert Williamson, and the silver watch belonging to my grandfather, John Moody. Well, that was the sea captain. Now, we don't know about what happened to those watches. This next lot are interesting. It's two oil paintings. One is the Mouth of the Cramond Burn, and the other is Craig Miller Castle, again belonging to this uncle, Robert Williamson. Now, the Mouth of the Cramond Burn is hanging in my nephew's lounge, and thereby hangs a bit of a tale because the Cramond River comes out into the Firth of Forth between Queensferry, where the Firth Bridge goes, and Edinburgh. And curiously, there's a little island called the Cramond Island, and there's a causeway out to it, which gets covered as the tide comes in. And interestingly enough, there are a whole lot of bollards which were put in during World War II to stop the U-boats coming in. So nice little bit of useless information that appeared. Finally, we've got the special constable's baton used when attending public executions in Montrose that belonged to my, again, uncle Robert Williamson. Now, you can see that there's a picture of it. It hangs in my cousin's lounge. It says VR, so that puts a date on it. It was Victoria de Regina, or Regina, depending on your Latin. And again, I've not been able to establish what exactly a public execution in Montrose was, but anyway, that's the story behind that. So here we get a whole lot of interesting things. So we've got John Alexander's grandfather had a sister, Janet, and John Alexander's great-great-great-grandfather was William Moody. So now suddenly we've got a John and a William and a Janet that we didn't know, or we didn't know anything about the William and Janet. So those were the issues that led me to dig into Scotland's people at some length. I'd never found my great-great-grandfather's John's birth certificate. And the reason why was the birth was registered as Moody. So this is one of the issues, and why you've got those interesting search facilities where you can look at exact copies or phonetic or whatever. So that becomes handy. And as it happened, this came out of looking at family search rather than Scotland's people. But then to get the detail, I had to go into Scotland's people. Now, this is this business of, here we see a John Moody with a Y, a James Moody with a Y, and Margaret and Janet with an IE, all children of William Moody, also with Ys and IEs, all married, or both, if you like, married to Catherine Paul. And they were all born in the Abercorn area, Abercorn Newton, which makes good sense. So that was the first bit of useful reconstruction. So here I've drawn a sort of family tree, if you like. You've got John Alexander down the bottom here, who was the lawyer, and his brother William. His father was a sea captain, married to Jane Scott. That's the twin brother, who eventually I discovered went to London to do shipbuilding. Never actually found anything much about Agnes, because I've got no real record of her, but I looked up this Robert Moody, and he went and managed a gas plant in England, I discovered, and had zillions of children, and as did all his offspring. So I gave up at that point, because, you know, it's getting a bit too obscure. Then you've got this sea captain's, so John Alexander's grandfather, John Moody, also a sea captain. Never found his date, nor could I find his date of marriage or where he was married, but he was certainly married to Jean Allen, and one of the births, this John Moody's birth certificate actually shows that Jane Allen's father was present, or had registered the birth, and was down as a solicitor. So this presumably is where some of the legal genes in my family occurred. So now what we found is this John Moody had a brother James and a sister Janet, married to whatever his name was. Hang on, not turning the pages fast enough. Thomas Lawless. Never able to find out anything much about Thomas Lawless. He was based quite near Bowness. We'll talk about that a bit later. But then lost track of him. So whether he was in the army, and he obviously went off to, might well have gone off to India or somewhere. And then we've got my grandfather's great-grandfather, in other words, my 3 times grandfather, William, managed to find him when he got married and who he got married to. So this sort of bit over here is all new, and hence the reason for repeating this, because it's an interesting case study, I think. And taking it further, so the issue now is when and where was my grandfather's great-grandfather William, when and where was he born, and who were his parents? So the assumption was that William's father must have been somewhere between 18 and 35 when John, the first sea captain, was born. Doing a search on all William Moody's born between 1750 and 1767, resulted in 16 hits for the whole of Scotland. Now, assuming that this William was born in the West Lothian area, which was a fair assumption because the concentration of the family was all around that sort of area. It resulted in a single hit of a William born in 1754 to parents William Moody and Elizabeth Easton. Okay, and so checking children born to this couple in Scotland's people produced 6 children. And so, which there are 3 children, or 4 children, 2 of whom are known as Agnes. So one of them must have died, and couldn't find any record of the death. But who owned the Malacca cane remains a mystery to me. But anyway, at least I was able to prove that there are sisters. Just to put it in geographic context, here's the Cramond and Cramond Island, and this little bit I was talking about with the causeway. There's Edinburgh. Queensferry is, this doesn't mention, this map doesn't show Abercorn, but Abercorn is about there, as we will see. Thomas, whatever his name is, was stationed in Linlithgow, and Corridon was where the sister came, where the father of the 3 sisters was born. So that's just to put it in slight context. You'll notice, incidentally, there's a tiny little village called Kinghorn tucked away up in Fife there. So, which is a quaint little forgotten village, a sort of seaside village. So there's Abercorn. This is a Google map. There's Queensferry. Here you can see. This is the new road bridge. There's the original road bridge with the rail bridge going through there. There's Abercorn. There's Corridon. There's Bowness. Then Lithgow. So that sort of puts things into geographic perspective, let's say. Now, we come to this person who I proved pretty conclusively wasn't a blood relative. But I thought, well, let me look up his will. So I've gone into legal records here, and I've looked at wills and testaments. And here, below me, is Robert Williamson's will of that date. He was a commission agent of 42 Bridge Street in Montrose and died in 1894. And the will is lodged with the Forfar Sheriff Court. So that's what the will looked like. Now, word of caution, do not download, do not try a screen grab. You won't be able to read it. So download it, and then you got to stand a chance of reading it, because it's, as you can see, you've got to become a handwriting expert. Okay, so let's look at the will. He's got cash of £2. He's got household furniture worth £93, appraised by J.W. Japp. More about him later. He's got 2 life policies worth £469, and he's got a loan to John Alexander and William Moody solicitors. So this is obviously to set these 2 up. They'd been born in Montrose, which is where Robert Williamson lived, but moved, obviously decided there was scope to become solicitors in Dumfries, which is where they went. And Robert Williamson obviously lent them money. So there's obviously a close family, well, relationship, let's put it that way. Just want to digress very slightly into Scottish Widow and Orphans Fund, because this is an interesting little bit of information. I don't know how many of you watched a TV series by the Scottish historian economist called Neil Ferguson, called The Ascent of Money. Now, in it, he talks about two church ministers, Robert Wallace and Alexander Webster, who were around in Edinburgh in the 1740s. Now, they were concerned because the widows at that time, their widows would have got 6 months stipend if one or other of the ministers died. And there was no, that was all. And, otherwise they'd have to rely on charity or faith, hope, faith, hope and charity, I guess. Anyway, they were good drinking buddies, apparently, especially, I think, Robert Wallace, who enjoyed his claret, or so one of the references mentions. Anyway, they palled up with a mathematics professor, and they sat, and his name was Colin McLaurin, and they collected data from the church records, because obviously they had access to all these records. So they looked up all the ministers and how quickly they died and so on and so forth. And they, together with this maths prof, produced a very early form of actuarial tables. And together with that sort of early work, this ultimately led to the Scottish Widow and Orphans Fund. So I found that an interesting little digression. Then if we look at the liabilities, he had liabilities of £37. So he was clearly worth a bit of money. He owed his doctor something, he owed the grocer something, he owed the coal merchants something, his servant got 6 months' wages, and then there's the rent of 42 Bridge Street for half a year, and then the funeral expenses with J&F Jap undertakers, and this included the grave. So I went in search of an almanac and found this, that we've got various Jap brothers who are cabinet makers, amongst other things. You've got misspelt John Moody, who's a shipmaster in Ferry Street, and you've got Robert Williamson, who's a wood merchant or an agent. So clearly, John Moody, the shipmaster, would bring in goods from various parts of the world, and Robert Williamson would sell them off, and they obviously formed a good business partnership. So that's the sort of thing you can dig out of almanac. There is 42 Bridge Street as it stands at the moment. Now, I think this is a replacement, because the two houses are, sorry, I need to point the two, sorry, how did I get back to that? Two houses on either side are sort of semis, or this would have formed part of a terrace. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So that 42 Bridge Street in its current form is not the original one, but anyway, at least the address is a real one. So I went into the valuation. Here you can see that John Moody was a tenant between 1876 and 1883, up until 1885. And then in 1895, Helen Williamson, the wife of the wretched Robert Williamson, became a tenant as well. So there, things clearly got put in the family tree or family situation. And here you've got detail of Helen Williamson, number 42, and she was paying £19 a year, I think it was. So that shows the use of how you can get something out of valuations. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the talk on the actual how I use things, the censuses, the birth, death, marriage, legal maps, directories. They all help to give you a pretty clear, or a much clearer picture of relatives and how they lived. There we go. Okay, so now this is for real, and we've logged into my account. Okay, so what we want to do is search records. And so these are all the various things you can search on. And right, so what I want to look at is, we'll go to advanced people search. Then I want to illustrate, I'm going to go into statutory records, and I want to go into marriages. And I want to look at, oh, that's interesting. We've got all Natalie's things, not mine. Anyway, Moody, John, spouse surname, Davidson, Susan, John Moody is a male, and they got married in 1891. Okay, so if we go now on to search, hopefully we should find them. There we go. John Alexander married Susan Davidson in the parish of Trocaire. And so we can go and look at the detail of that. So just a point here, your first going in, you can see there is one result, it's showing 1 of 1. Clearly, if you get multiples, you can then select from those. And then when you look at the detail, it's at that point that you pay your almost 7 rand. Okay, so clicking on that, here you see the actual marriage. There we go, it's this one. I'm going to, now this one we can enlarge. So I'm going to zoom in. You can see you can save, print, zoom in, zoom out, magnify, fit height, fit width, rotate, oh, all manner of goodies that you can play with. Anyway, I'm enlarging it, and then we'll show you. Let's, right, so here we've got, in the 8th of October, 1891, in 5 Portland Place, Maxwell Town, we had the after something bans according to the form of the United Presbyterian Church of Scotland. So that's how the marriage was performed. You've got John Alexander Moody, a solicitor who's a bachelor, aged 30, marrying Susan Davidson, a retired farmer's daughter who's a spinster, aged 29. He, as we know, was at the Bank of Scotland house in Irish Street in Dumfries, which is now no longer a house but an office block. My grandmother was living at 5 Portland Place in Maxwell Town, which is where her parents had retired to. Then you've got John Moody, a retired ship owner, and his wife, Jane Moody, maiden surname Scott. So she was a Jane Scott, hence my aunt Elsie Jane Scott. And then William Davidson, that's my grandmother's father, was a retired farmer who was married to Sarah Davidson, maiden surname Greenshield. Now, this Greenshield business was quite funny because I subsequently discovered that apparently William Davidson was not a particular, the Greenshield's father-in-law was not very happy when his daughter married daughter Sarah married William Davidson, because they lived on a farm called Culbay, which is near Kirkkinner, and Mr. Greenshields lived in a much bigger and wealthier farm also near Kirkkinner called I've forgotten what it's called, been to both places. And anyway, interestingly, I always assumed that Greenshields was a landowner rather than a tenant farmer. Not true at all. He was also a tenant farmer, but that particular farm was a very, very wealthy farm. Even now, if you start Googling it, you can see Google Earthing it. You can, over the years, I've noticed enormous improvements being made to the farm all the time. So it's obviously a very prosperous sort of farm. Anyway, then as witnesses, William Moody and Lizzie Davidson, that was one of my grandmother's sisters. My grandmother was one of 11. And apparently the grandmother eventually sort of gave up and used to read Gladstone's speeches while the elder children looked after the younger ones. Well, that's a little bit of family nonsense, but anyway, that's that story. Okay, right, so now I'm going to, so that's an example, so we can go back to results, because I now want to modify this. How am I doing for time, by the way?
You're absolutely fine.
Okay, I want to start a new search. So I'm now going to look at census returns, and I'm going to look at William Davidson. Oh, sorry, surname would help. David. Try David. Sorry, typing is not my strong point. William. Spouse name. Wait a minute, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I want census. Start again. So I want the 1871. I just want to give you a flavor of this, you know, how it's done. So now we want Tom, no, not Susan David. That's right. Okay. William. You can add in forename of other person on the census. I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to put in an age range of 55 to 65. Again, it's useful, you know, you can put in a broad brush thing and you can start to narrow down. Okay, so let's do a search on that. And you'll see it shows one of this is one of 125 of 63 hits of 3 pages. So that's pretty unworkable. He is actually here, but I'll show you what happens when I'll go into Wigton. Okay, update results. And that's narrowed it down. There's a William John and a William. And this is the guy we want, Kirkinner. And so here we've got the actual census record. And let's blow this up. Hang on. Right, so you can see it's Culbae, C-U-L-B-A-E farmhouse, inhabited. And there's William Davidson, head, who's married, he's aged 58, married to Sarah, and he's got daughters Jane, Anne, James, son James, daughter Mary, my grandmother Susan, Agnes, and Lizzie, Sarah, and then they've got a servant, Margaret Black, and so on. So then moving across gives the ages. Then you can see that William was a farmer of 200 acres, arable land, I presume, employed 4 men, 2 boys, 2 women. And then this says farmer's wife, so that's this Sarah. He was born in Kirkinner. Everybody was born in Kirkinner in Wigtonshire, or what is now Dumfries. And I think it's Dumfries and Wigness. Anyway, I think it's Dumfriesshire. So here you can see all the daughters and so on, and even down to where the servants were born. So that I guess pretty well covers it. I think, Elton, maybe we can throw open to some discussion if anybody who has questions or comment.
I'm not going to ask a question, I'm just going to say, I've got my paternal side is Scottish, and I have found it so well organized. As long as you've got a rough age range and the right name, even if you haven't got much details, I've found so much stuff there. I've just found it the easiest and most rewarding searching I've had to do. And as far as I remember, but I'm not sure, because I paid, I think it was some money about 3 years ago, and it's still valid. So
yes, good point.
You can do, it sits there in your account, and they might remind you once a year. But, you know, I registered it, and then I didn't go back for ages, and then I did. And I have to say, the money doesn't seem to go at much rate. I've just found it definitely the easiest and most rewarding part of any of the searching I've done so far.
You actually raise a secondary point, which is that they keep all your searches, or, you know, if you paid for something and you've forgotten all about it and you go back into it, you suddenly find, hey, thank goodness I paid. And, you know, it's there as paid. And so it'll show you all the detail. And so you can go back and back. And I can't remember how many years I've been at this, but it hasn't disappeared yet. So their backup system obviously works pretty well.
I found a great grandfather is a fishing rod maker.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I've uncovered all sorts of interesting ancestors. One of the Kinghorns was involved. I gave a talk some years ago to the Genealogical Society on the Lighthouse Stevensons. Now, this is a family of Stevensons culminating in Robert Louis, who didn't want to build lighthouses. Anyway, they built lighthouses all around Scotland, and it's a fascinating tale. And I discovered that one of my Kinghorn relatives was what was he? Oh, heavens. Not a cabinet maker. No, he was a wood craftsman of some sort. Carpenter, probably. Anyway, he was involved in building of one of these lighthouses and sat on a little island of Ereid, which is off the east coast, where they were building this lighthouse. And Robert Louis happened to go to this particular island, and Kidnapped is based around this island. So that was a fun piece of information too.
Dave, I've got a question. Do you perhaps have an old map that you can recommend? Because I don't know these Scottish counties, and it's confusing, but it's like Abergavenny and things like that. Mm-hmm. And they seem to fall not where they're supposed to fall if I look at the map.
Okay, one of the things I've found particularly useful is identifying parishes. So you Google a particular parish and it'll show you a map of where that particular parish is. And I suspect you could do the same with the counties, because the counties tend to change shape and change names every so often. I found an ordnance survey map. I was looking for, in fact, one of these farms and found an ordnance survey map going back to 1900 odd. So that was also useful. Now, please don't ask me how I arrived at that. I don't remember, but I obviously did succeed in finding that particular thing.
David, in one of your earlier, this might be a bit of a strange question, but one of your earlier slides on your ancestry, I think it was your great grandparents. That's, I think, where you've got 8, eh? Yeah. Okay.
Hang on, let me just go.
There was
Yeah.
a personage with the surname Presley, Presley,
Oh, Presley, yes.
S-L-E-Y, which disappeared. So I'm assuming that Presley is
that Presley comes on my paternal side. It's my paternal my paternal grandmother's side. All I can remember from discussion with her way back was that the Presleys went to America, and I always wondered had any link up with Elvis, but I don't think I think Elvis was a stage name, or Elvis Presley was a stage name anyway.
Yeah, I happen to be quite a fan of Elvis, and I know you mustn't, what do they say in Afrikaans, yourself blind star about the spelling. Elvis, as I know it, has always only had one S.
Oh.
But that doesn't mean he can't be related. May I think I might try to use a bit of, just ask some people who know what they're doing. Would you mind if I took your slide or screen and just said to somebody, look, here's a body named so-and-so Presley?
Yeah, I did actually do some research on the Presleys, but I didn't follow it up that much because I was looking at other things. But certainly, John, I think I can't remember whether I've got your email address, but I'll get it from and I'll email you some of the basic details.